Okay, we're going to get started now. Appreciate everyone joining us. I'm going to kick things off. We'll do introductions in a second, but first of all, I just want to welcome everyone to this joint Clearco and Cavela webinar on tariffs. So tariffs are obviously very much in the news today. Very dynamic situation that we face today. Lots of headlines all the time. We at Clearco spend a lot of time thinking about tariffs, and I know that Anthony at Cavela does as well. It's always exciting, and there are very recent news and headlines today that we'll be able to talk about in a little bit. It's competing with news out of Rome and the conclave, but excited to get started, and we'll do introductions now. So I'm Andrew Curtis. I'm Clearco CEO. I spent bulk of my career before coming to Clearco working in finance in New York City at a few investment banks and investment managers. Clearco is a finance company at heart, tech-enabled as it is. And I'll ask Anthony to introduce himself.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Hi, everybody. So my name's Anthony. Some of you, I'm recognizing some names of our customers here. You'll already know me. So I'm coming from a sourcing and manufacturing backgrounds, a bit of background on myself. I was born and raised in Southeast Asia. My family's been in Asia for 3 generations now. Everyone's involved in trade. So this has been an area that I've known quite closely. Lived about a decade in Latin America. I built various data science, AI product teams and San Francisco tech startups focusing on automation in low-tech industries, and most recently working on Cavela, which is a marriage of how to leverage technology to facilitate and make sourcing a lot easier. A lot of you are familiar with a lot of e-commerce tools that make the selling of products easy, Shopify, Stripe, what have you. What you'll probably have noticed is that sourcing has not followed that same trend. We're building tools that make that process a lot easier by and large.
Okay, so let me give you a quick overview of Clearco. Clearco, at heart, is a working capital provider. We exclusively fund DTC e-coms. So as you can imagine, many of our customers have significant tariff exposure. Depends on exactly where they're sourcing product from. But what we do is we provide funding for e-commerce brands. Typically, we are funding the following cost categories or spend categories. So we fund inventory, we fund marketing spend, and we fund logistics, shipping, freight, etc. So the way our product works is we underwrite our customers. We give them a capacity, meaning the amount of capital we're willing to advance to them. And then they consume that capital by uploading invoices, which we pay on their behalf directly to inventory suppliers, Meta and Google, freight and logistics companies, etc. The beauty of our product is we're not taking any of your equity. We're not asking for personal guarantees or collateral. And versus some of our competitors, our payments are capped weekly. So you know exactly what you will pay us. It's an amount that does not vary with your revenue. So we have lots of insights into tariffs based on the position of our customers, which we'll get to in a second.
On Cavela's end, we are a AI-powered product sourcing platform for e-com brands. As I mentioned, sourcing is very much a convoluted and involved, time-consuming process. A lot of you will be experiencing that right now as you try to shift your supply chains, perhaps outside of China or outside of your current sourcing solution. What we've done is we have automated away a lot of the typical work that goes into sourcing. A lot of you will be familiar with ChatGPT. Similar technologies can be used to essentially automate and streamline workflows, which is what we've done. We automate supplier matching with 200,000 plus suppliers across 40 different countries. And what we do is we are a nose to tail solution, which means that given a product description or whatever tech pack or details you might have, we can find the best supplier at the most cost-effective price point for you. We handle absolutely everything from quoting, sampling, on-site QA, ordering, importing, tariff handling. And by virtue of automating a lot of these processes, what we've done is we've been able to cut production costs on average by about 37%, simply by virtue of having a private network of suppliers with strong relationships, as well as automating a lot of these workflows, as I said, which allow us to pass on these savings to our users. And in the process, saving 90% plus of sourcing time. You won't be sending, WhatsApp messages, WeChat messages at all hours of the night, no more email chains. We've sort of streamlined that entire process to make it a lot more easy for brands to get competitive quotes. So on this note, we're teaming up with Clearco. This is a very natural marriage here. As far as Cavela and Clearco, we're sort of tackling a similar part of the sourcing piece, which is to say we're giving brands smarter AI-powered vendor sourcing. What does that mean? Allowing brands to pay suppliers on time, quickly, effectively, to turn around capital effectively allows you to have better supplier relationships, stronger margins, and especially in these uncertain times, it's massively important to be able to be quite reactive. And so, we've been working on this partnership for some time now. Clearco funds Cavela invoices, and on our end, we are able to leverage the solution that Clearco offers in order to get suppliers paid quickly and without any delays, which is a massive value add for a lot of the brands we're working with.
Okay, so let's get into the topic at hand today. I'm going to touch lightly on this page and then we're going to proceed. And I think it's probably going to be fairly conversational between me and Anthony. The first and most obvious thing is, what are tariffs? So tariffs are taxes charged on goods imported from other countries. I think it's important to understand, especially in light of a lot of rhetoric we hear out of Washington, D.C., that our customers that are sourcing product from overseas, they are paying the tariffs, right? No one else is paying the tariffs except the customer. And the customer is the importer of record, and the importer of record is the one that is on the hook for the tariffs. So this has direct and immediate effects on their business, most importantly, their cost structure. Negatively affects gross margins, requires them in certain cases to scramble to search for manufacturing or production changes. They may be changing their order sizes in order to more cost efficiently fund and source product. And of course, this is also going to change customer purchaser behavior because unsurprisingly, a lot of our customers, a lot of companies that are sourcing product from overseas, in the face of tariffs, will be increasing prices. There are opportunities, of course, to split tariff costs with your foreign suppliers. But I think in most cases, you're going to see customers raise prices. And given the differing tariffs, obviously China has different exposure to tariffs today than countries like Vietnam or other countries in Southeast Asia or South Asia. Our customers are going to face supply chain disruptions, and they're also, of course, aggressively pursuing changes in the way they source their product, specific suppliers, countries of origin for those suppliers, et cetera. So what does all of this do? Well, it creates a massive amount of uncertainty. And we're seeing that in our customer base. I'm sure Anthony's seeing it as well. Uncertainty, as you know, that is the buzzword. That is a word that you hear every day, all day these days. Uncertainty can create challenges for your business. But I would also say that a lot of the things that we're seeing in tariffs can create opportunities for certain of our customers, not all of our customers, but there is opportunity in this disruption and in this market volatility and these macroeconomic changes that we're facing. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes.
So this is a bit of a timeline of what's been happening over the past couple months. Those who've followed this closely will know that this is not a comprehensive list. It would be quite difficult to put all the details that fed into this timeline. As Andrew mentioned, what has been very difficult has been not so much the tariffs themselves, but the sudden and erratic rollout of these. Markets and brands and suppliers, in fact, are not just reacting to the implementation and repealing of tariffs, which have occurred, repeatedly over the past months, but also to the various threats that have come up. So currently, a lot of the big tariffs that are in place that people are talking about are the 25% steel and aluminum tariff, the Section 232. Ones that might be a bit more pertinent to the brands on this call are the 20% fentanyl tariff that was applied on China, the Section 301, and specifically the reciprocal Liberation Day tariffs that were applied essentially globally and that range by country. But as I said, what brands are also factoring in here is not just the implementation of these tariffs as such, but trying to plan ahead and knowing where is a good place to bet on in the future. And that's what we're going to be talking about afterwards. Most recently, we're seeing a couple developments. Some of you will be aware of the de minimis loopholes. The de minimis loophole was one that allowed for the importing of goods under $800 into the United States, tax-free. That has been repealed for China and Hong Kong, and there are talks of it being also repealed for other countries as well. That hasn't been put in place, but it is being reflected in Temu, Shein pricing. And as we look to what's going to happen next, some of you will have looked at what Besant has been saying with regards to China. China is likely going to, they're talking about reducing tariffs on China, and we are starting to see the first trade deals post-Liberation Day. The one with the UK was just announced today. And we can expect that some more trade deals are going to be trickling in, and it remains to be seen how that'll be applying to China specifically, which is, I know, something that a lot of people are thinking about.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing. Again, Clearco funds working capital exclusively to DTC ecom, so I feel like we have a front row seat to all of this. So we see all the good and the bad of this. And so on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll just see kind of some pretty characteristic or typical reactions to the tariffs. And what I would say overall is there's enormous uncertainty. Many of our customers are exercising a lot of prudence and being extremely thoughtful about how they're spending, about how they're acquiring inventory, and also how they're funding additional working capital from their funding partners, Clearco in particular. So I think in general, our most thoughtful and some of our best customers are just slowing a little bit. They're being increasingly defensive. And some of those with significant exposure to Chinese suppliers, but who also have a lot of current inventory on hand today, they're electing to pause and spend that inventory forward with the hope that there'll be sufficient clarity and resolution in the coming months that they can then turn on the spigot again, begin making orders, begin funding additional capital in order to make those orders. But what will happen is it remains uncertain. Obviously, there's the news today on the UK, although I would say the details there are sparse, so we're not really certain what specifically that will look like, what specifically that agreement or what specific form that agreement will take. But hopefully there will be progress. But in the meantime, people are just trying to do the best they can with the uncertainty that they face. De minimis, which is the often referred to as the loophole by which you could drop ship or ship very small items, small value items under $800. De minimis is ending. That's having a particularly powerful impact on brands like Shein and Temu. One simple question there is if you have historically competed with Shein and Temu, this is creating or can create opportunity for you. So it's an aspect of tariffs that's creating good news for certain of our customers. We're seeing those brands spend differently on marketing. We're seeing in the case of Temu, just they're hitting the brakes on shipping to US, and they're taking other paths to getting product to the US versus individual shipments. So there are lots of different reactions in our customer base, and what I would say is the one thing we just keep coming back to is, outside of course the uncertainty, the negative impacts of uncertainty facing our customers, is that all of our customers have different exposures and are facing different challenges with regard to the tariffs. There is no one size fits all in terms of reactions or path forward. And so if you have direct exposure to China, but you have sufficient margins, you have very strong gross margins, you can absorb higher tariff costs. But if you have extraordinarily thin margins, you have very limited flexibility to do that. We have certain customers who look at the tariff situation as creating opportunity because they're not sourcing product from China or other heavily impacted tariff countries. So I'll give you a simple example. We have a women's footwear company that has a factory in Brazil. They understand that the tariffs are creating extraordinary disruption for their Chinese and Southeast Asian competitors, and so what they're doing is they're trying to spend more aggressively, and because they think of it as an opportunity to take market share and sell more. And so they come to us in that case, and they actually want to fund additional capital, and they're raising additional equity too. So reactions vary a lot across our customer base. Exposures vary a lot across the customer base. And I think with regard to capital providers like Clearco, the best thing that we do is stay in touch, very close touch with our customers, help them think through the impact of tariffs, tell them or help them understand where they can lean forward, because I think the worst thing you can do in periods of disruption or volatility like this is just to retract. And that the same thing goes for us as goes for our customers. If you retract, or if you worst case hide under your desk and just wait for this period of dislocation to pass, you could be missing opportunities. So what we're talking to our customers about is be prepared. Even if you're being defensive now and you're exercising a lot of prudence, be prepared to pivot quickly in order to take advantage of any new news on tariffs, because given the U.S. administration and how quickly they move in one direction or another, I think it pays to be very thoughtful about, okay, if X, Y, and Z happens, and I realize clarity in the situation in the very near term, what do I need to be set up to do immediately? How do I want to spend immediately? How do I want to go back to my traditional suppliers immediately and acquire new inventory? So again, lots of different reactions, lots of different exposure. There is no one size fits all in terms of customer exposure or the paths that customers can be taking to put themselves in the best position to weather or take advantage of tariffs. So these are three basic things you can do right now. They're one of many. First thing, and I'm going to do this kind of in reverse order. First thing you can do is negotiate with your supplier. So the easiest thing to say, and the most obvious, is tell your supplier you want them to share the cost of the tariffs. Suppliers overseas they have massive exposure to tariffs. It's not just their customers that are experiencing the pain. So you have pricing power. You can ask for different or better pricing in terms. We were speaking to a customer the other day who had spent a lot of time. First, they had spent time just negotiating a split of the cost of the tariff with their supplier, and their supplier was open to doing that and willing to do that. So they had an initial kind of split of 50-50 costs of the tariffs. So that's a successful negotiation, not a surprising outcome. It's hard to imagine situations where the customer would bear 100% of the tariff costs. But the second thing that they had done, which was, I thought, novel, which is they had negotiated new payment terms. And so in their specific example, they were pulling orders forward. They were ordering very heavily on the front end at the beginning of all the tariffs news, but they were negotiating payment dates based on when they would have otherwise placed the orders, meaning in their normal purchasing cycle, maybe they were placing orders in March, and then again in May, and then maybe again in June or July. And so they were pulling those orders forward because they thought that would be advantageous given the uncertainty. But they were negotiating terms with their suppliers and telling them they would pay them based on the as if or when they would have been making the payments in a normal world, which I thought was interesting. With regard to acquisition costs, that's number 2 here. Natural to ask, have your CPAs changed? How has your ad spend or marketing spend changed? How has your marketing strategy and marketing spend become more efficient as some of the companies that we've described earlier, Shein, Temu, and other competitors reduce their ad spend? Obviously, we saw several weeks ago rapid transmission of tariff changes into how Temu and Shein were spending on advertising. So less competition for ad spend or ad space means less expensive spending for their competitors in the United States. And then very simple question to ask in number 1 is, are your goods exempt under Annex 2? There are a number of goods that are exempt from tariffs. Obvious thing to do is simply to check, and we have a link here on how you can do that. And these are just 3 of the things that you can do quickly or now. I think the biggest thing to do is, although there's massive uncertainty, it pays to plan and it pays to scenario plan. And so scenario planning is, okay, how might the next set of tariffs or tariff news impact my business, and how do I want to be prepared in each scenario to act? So if there is resolution or clarity in terms of the tariff regime with China, how will I spend in the face of a favorable resolution or a partially favorable resolution? How quickly can I, for example, approach my funding partners, Clearco, for example, so that I can deploy capital quickly in the face of changes in the tariff situation? So planning, as always, for all of our customers all the time makes a lot of sense, but specifically with regard to tariffs, I think it pays to do some scenario planning to understand a range of reasonable outcomes and how you might react in each of those. Okay, so for our customers, these are some of the things that we've seen them do and that we encourage them to explore. A very simple example, and we've been talking about this since February, March timeframe, is by ordering larger amounts, by increasing bulk purchases from manufacturers, what improved terms can you get? How can you lower your per unit costs? And obviously the goal there is, if you're able to lower your per unit costs, extract more favorable terms, then you can offset some of the cost of the tariffs. Same thing goes with paying in a faster time frame, and you can of course leverage funding partners. Clearco, again, as an example, you can leverage funding partners so that you can fund faster time payments, larger or bulk orders. These are all things that our capital can facilitate and allow you to do. And then of course, and this is really Anthony's area of expertise, you can switch to local manufacturers for packaging, supplies, production. You can shore differently, meaning you can pivot to places like South Asia, Vietnam, away from China, which has obviously lower tariff rates. And these are all strategies that everyone's exploring. Obviously, shoring differently is the most obvious example. Many of our customers were very far along in doing that anyway, given the events of the last few years. And in many cases, they're able to make that transition rapidly. But there are other of our customers that have exclusive supplier relationships in China, and it takes time for them to figure this out. And I think Anthony probably sees this regularly, where if certain customers are behind the 8 ball, they need to make changes rapidly, and Cavela can help them do that.
Great. So on our end, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing brands do to mitigate the impact of tariffs. I'll preface this by saying that there's no one size fits all. These are somewhat unprecedented times, and so brands are getting creative with how they're applying solutions to their particular pain points. So by and large, look at what makes sense for your business. But this is what we've seen for the various businesses that we've been working with. The first and most immediate thing that brands are doing, and this is across, I would say, most product categories and most places that people are sourcing, is to postpone a production or import event. The reason for this is that in the current state of uncertainty, a lot of brands are choosing to wait until the dust settles, so to say, and until we have a bit more clarity, then they can make a better decision as to not just when to order, but where to move their supply chain. So that is, the first and most obvious things. In the event that that is not possible, what are brands doing? They're doing a number of things. First, the utilization of bonded warehouses. For those who are not aware what bonded warehouses are, they are essentially overseas warehouses where you can place your stock and use that as a place from which you can import in a sort of piecemeal fashion your stock into the United States. That allows you to effectively pay tariffs on subsets of your stock piece by piece. And obviously the working assumption there is that tariffs will go down over the long term. And that allows you to essentially break up the hit from tariffs if you are expecting the tariffs to go down in the medium and long term. Another technique that brands are using is HTS code optimization. So this, again, you can do this the right way and the wrong way. And so we are obviously going to strongly advocate for the right way here. A lot of products you could make a case for falling within different categories. One example is in the footwear, whether footwear is considered sports footwear or not can be something that can be argued somewhat either way. And so if you are in a position where you can do that, you can have more favorable tariffs applied to your product. That is something to see on a case-by-case basis. And again, something to be done very judiciously and make sure that you're doing it in the confines of what is actually legal and appropriate for your product. But that is one thing that a lot of brands are revisiting. Another is the declared invoice itemization. So when you are getting your invoices applied for your products, not all of your payments to suppliers will be for production, but they might be for R&D, for instance. Getting R&D separated out can be one way that you avoid tariffs for a certain subset of what you're paying. And so just revisiting what your invoice looks like is one way to cut the production costs, again, depending on the nature of your product. Fourth would be looking at how the tariffs are applied. Some of you will be familiar with this, some of you not, but FOB versus EXW costs of your product. So FOB is the cost of the product all the way to the shipping port versus EXW, which is to the door of the factory. So there is FOB will typically be higher than EXW because it includes the production of the goods as well as transport to the shipping port. You shouldn't be paying tariffs on the movement of the product from the factory door to the port. And so making sure that your invoices are calculated with respect to EXW rather than FOB is one way to make sure you're not paying tariffs on parts of your invoice that you shouldn't be. Another, which is more on the sales side, is we're seeing brands get creative with how they are engaging with their own customers. So wait and save discounts for customers is one thing that we've seen. We're in a fortunate, quote unquote, position whereby everyone is aware of what's happening with the tariffs. And so what brands are finding is that a lot of their customers can be a little bit more understanding, a little bit more lenient. And so applying things such as a wait and save discount, whereby brands will say, hey, we'll sell you this product at a discount, 10, 20%, with the promise of shipping it out in July or August or what have you, sometimes can give brands a bit of breathing room. So make sure they're still getting capital flowing in, but saving them from the pressures of having to import their products right now. So a lot of these things, HTS code optimization, FOB, XW, these are all things that Cavela is helping with. But the biggest thing that brands should do from a medium and long-term perspective is looking to diversify supply chain. And historically, this has not been something that brands have taken too seriously. A lot of supply chain approach has been very much a set it and forget it approach, whereby you'll find a supplier, it's the supplier that works for you, and you won't touch that relationship again. I think that what you're going to see, and we'll talk about this on the next slide as well, is that approach is slowly going away. Diversification is no longer a nice to have, it's a requirement for a contingency plan for your supply chain. We've seen a lot of supply chain disruptions, even over the past decade, from this latest tariff situation to COVID, for instance. Brands need contingency plans, and this is precisely what the Cavela was built upon. We find you suppliers, not just different suppliers within countries, but across countries. That diversification across borders has been something that brands have not really looked at so closely, and in some cases it can be difficult given the nature of your product. But having a smattering of different suppliers in different countries, or even within the same country with alternate pricing, gives you the flexibility to pivot your supply chain and maintain a agile production run in the face of anything that can happen. And what we'll see here is that these next months are likely to continue to be somewhat uncertain.
Yeah, and I think the diversification point is critical. I think it applies regardless of tariffs. As is often the case, diversification makes sense. It's highly risky to put all of your eggs in one basket. We guide our customers, even when it's disadvantageous for Clearco. We guide our customers to consider diversifying capital funding sources. So if you just think about, you think about that, if you're always going to the same capital funding partner, then you're assuming some risk with that funding partner. And it's the same thing with tariffs. You've assumed supplier risk who has exposure in a particular geography. So as always, diversification makes sense, whether you're talking about your supply chain or whether you're talking about capital. And I think, like Anthony said, it's inevitable that you see people diversifying their suppliers. We've been seeing it for a while. Certainly tariffs date back to, or tariffs discussion and volatility date back to the first Trump administration. This is just a deepening of it. And a lot of our customers were taking actions to diversify back then. And it's just a wise thing to do.
Absolutely. One thing just to note on what brands are doing, to be wary of shady supplier practices. So right now we're in this time where a lot of suppliers are understandably trying to retain business and are also trying to get creative with how they're helping brands mitigate the impact of tariffs. And so what we've seen with a couple of brands has been their existing suppliers have one way or another shielded them, quote unquote, from the tariffs entirely. What is concerning is when suppliers aren't able to say what exactly they're doing. And we've seen all sorts of different practices, everything from moving product to a different country and relabeling it, and other hiding the origin of the product. All these things can be very appealing because they're the suppliers approaching brands and saying, oh, we can make sure you're not paying for these additional costs based on the tariffs. The problem is when brands get caught. And what's happening now is that there's added scrutiny at the US border, and it's going to be very difficult to outsmart the US border, as you can imagine. And they're keeping a lookout for brands and suppliers trying to be a little bit sneaky here. And the problem is that when you are caught, the supplier is not going to be footing the bill. And we've actually already seen that in a couple of cases whereby brands where suppliers were making promises on the origin of certain products, and when they got caught and were liable for tens of thousands of dollars, they had to not just pay for that in that instance, but it also opened the door for an audit of the last couple of years, and it turned into an absolute nightmare. So be very wary of shady supplier practices. It can be very appealing to to minimize the impact of tariffs. But if you operate outside the law, it can come bite you, and in a very big and real way.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something I think very important, Anthony, which is there's massive scrutiny here, and the U.S. government, if there's one thing they have, it's resources, and they can devote and aim enormous amounts of resources on this kind of inspection, followed by subsequent audits. So I think, long story short, probably not worth it. And so beware.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the common thing that a lot of suppliers have been saying is that they will issue export invoices that are considerably lower than the actual value of the goods. That's one way to cut the tariffs. So to Andrew's point, at the border, they are going to be looking at what the average cost of production for a given good is. They're going to look at your history of importing. They're going to look at what that supplier has been providing in the past. If they notice a sizable difference in what that pricing looks like, they're going to take a closer look. So as Andrew said, they have a lot of resources to apply a lot of scrutiny to the invoices. So just be careful. One thing I want to talk about here is just long term. Where are things headed, right? So we've talked about what brands should do now. How should businesses plan over the long term? And obviously, we're operating in a world whereby nobody really knows the right answer. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's everyone's guess. But there are certain things you can look at, and certain first principles that can provide some indication of where things might be headed. And certainly on our end with Cavela, we have certain views. Happy to share here. So, the first question is, well, how long can tariffs remain in place, right? I think that what is becoming very apparent for a lot of brands is that specifically for China, it's going to be very difficult for China to be replaced on the global stage, certainly in the short and medium term. So what we're expecting is essentially tariffs for China to come down, and this is something that actually Trump has come out and said as recently as about a week ago, that he's expecting tariffs for China to come down, not to zero, obviously, but a certain amount. And the mechanism is very simple. Up until now, a lot of the stress from tariffs has been sitting on the shoulders of brands specifically, but end consumers have been somewhat shielded. Up until now, obviously, de minimis being repealed means that Temu, Shein, all those costs are going up, and now consumers are starting to feel that stress directly. Inventory, which was perhaps plentiful about a month ago, is going to be slowly running out as brands choose to wait on placing orders. And so what we're going to start to see is the pressure of tariffs move from applying solely to the brands and start to trickle down to end consumers, which from the perspective of the US government is going to cause some issues and cause added incentive to start to find some solutions. We're starting to approach the time whereby brands are going to have to place orders for Black Friday, Christmas, what have you. These are important dates that consumers are going to be noticing. And that pressure is going to be slowly, as I said, applied to the consumer, and they're going to pass that on to the government. So we are expecting, given that China can't be replaced, that some of those tariffs are going to be lowered, and it remains to be seen exactly how much that will happen. But looking at China specifically, the question is, well, how do we really move on from China? A lot of you may have started, if you were sourcing in China previously and are starting to explore other regions of the world, the Vietnams, the Cambodias, the Indias, Pakistans, perhaps you've gone into Turkey, Egypt, and Latin America, you'll start to notice that China is actually a very nice place to source products. The reason they're pretty simple. MOQs can be a lot lower. They have capacity to do a suite of product categories that are simply just very difficult outside of China. If you've had to make any product that has plastic molding, for instance, you'll find that your options outside of China are a lot more reduced than if you have a pure soft good, for instance. So certain product categories are actually gonna be very difficult for you to make outside of China. In addition, capacity, right? So if we stop sourcing from China, where does that go? It's not going to all go to Vietnam. Vietnam is certainly doesn't have the capacity to handle all of the manufacturing from China. So it's going to spill over into other places. The capacity globally is just not there to capture everything that was previously made in China. A lot of you will have also seen differences in reliability, right? So one very nice thing that a lot of you will probably be aware of is once you start to deal with suppliers outside of China, the response times can be a little bit longer. They can be a little bit less thorough in how they're responding. And that is true not just for other countries in Southeast Asia or South Asia or Latin America, but also the United States. I think a lot of people went into the reshoring exercise expecting that US manufacturers would be as, a certain level of responsiveness that I think we expect in the West, and find that actually, you know what? China is a very well-oiled machine. It's been the supply chain and the manufacturing hub of the world for a lot of reasons. And one of those is that they are effectively very reliable. And then finally, expertise. As soon as you start to source outside of China, you are going to be met with a set of demands that suppliers in China typically don't. So suppliers in China have entire teams of product designers, marketers, branding experts. They have a very comprehensive team that removes a lot of the work from brands who are sourcing with them, which is to say, you don't have to necessarily provide a detailed tech pack. You can provide a set of photos and diagrams, and they can extrapolate the rest. That's not going to happen for other suppliers in Cambodia or Vietnam, for instance. So for all those reasons, we're not anticipating a massive shift from China in the way that I think things are being talked about, especially if those tariffs start to be rolled back as we're anticipating. Again, it will depend on how much those tariffs are rolled back. And then finally, just on a point about reorganization, if things do move on from China, where do they go? We're expecting decentralized production. So it's not going to be one country that takes over all of the production. You're going to start to see smaller production hubs scattered across the world. Some of it's going to remain in China, but some of it will move to other parts of South Asia. We're very bullish on South Asia for reasons that we can get into in the Q&A. But you're going to start to see sort of a trickling out of manufacturing that is going to be more widespread than concentrated in a given area. And all that feeds into this idea of what should brands' strategy be broadly for supply chain. And that is essentially indexing heavily on agility and diversified production. So, this idea that you have a single point of contact with the supplier, it's a handshake deal built over a relationship of 10 years, is likely going to be going away in a world of more agile, efficient markets, more technology integrated suppliers. You don't have to have flown to Guangzhou to meet your supplier in person in order to get your production made. That's slowly going to be going away as well. So we're going to be seeing a supply chain strategy that really hinges upon agility and diversified production. And that's essentially what we've been building with Cavela this idea that you should be able to source products quickly, effectively, and to pivot your supply chain based off of what makes the most sense in any given time, whether that is from one country or another, or you need to quickly release a new product because there's a higher faster pace of production these days. Just having supply chains that can be set up and pivoted quickly is something that we're going to see the pace of increasing over the coming years to come.
Okay, so natural question to ask is how we can help you. Our North Star at Clearco is to serve a group of very talented and dedicated entrepreneurs and operators in running their businesses. We do that in several ways. The most obvious, of course, is funding, but there are other ways that we help out as well. So on the funding front, it's pretty straightforward. We can underwrite your business very quickly. We can turn around a commitment of capital within 48 hours of a customer engaging with us, assuming they're providing us the right information that we request. You can use that capital to buy in larger quantities, some of the bulk ordering topic that we described earlier. You can use our capital to fund inventory faster. You can use our capital to fund marketing spend quickly in light of all of the changes in marketing costs as Shein and Temu pause or retract. So lots of different productive uses of our capital, and our goal, and this fits with Anthony's comments about how dynamic the current environment is, our goal is to be able to engage with our existing customers as well as prospective new customers, quickly make sense of their business and be able to tell them what funding capacity we can provide them, and then quickly enable them to deploy that funding capacity. So that's one very simple, obvious category. But the other thing that we pride ourselves in is providing intelligent and sound advice. So Clearco is run by and staffed with a lot of people with deep expertise in finance, and we can help you understand exactly how your gross margins and other measures of either cash flow production or generation or traditional P&L or income statement measurements are being impacted by both tariffs to begin with, but then a range of reactions or potential actions in the face of tariffs. So while we generate revenue by providing capital and earning fees on the capital that we provide, we also want to be a trusted advisor to our customers. That helps us deepen our relationships with our customers and supports our primary goal of driving originations of capital to customers that are creditworthy, that we think are dedicated and skilled operators. And then the last thing I would say is, and Cavela is a great example here, is that we have lots of partners. And we have companies like Cavela we work extremely closely with. They have a different area of expertise, like Anthony said earlier at the outset of the call. When we have conversations like this, it's a perfect marriage between someone who has extraordinary sourcing expertise and Clearco, of course, which has extraordinary capital and financial expertise. So we want you to call on us for a range of different things. First and foremost, we want to provide you funding, but we want to also be a thought partner with you, and we want to introduce you to partners like Cavela that can help you in other respects.
Great. And on the Cavela side, so we're doing a number of things. First and foremost, shifting your supply chain from high tariff regions to lower duty markets. In the current tariff situation, this is the best medium and long-term strategy you can take, and especially maintaining those different supply chain options is core to how we build this out. Getting quotes from vetted suppliers in 40+ countries effortlessly. This is, again, one of the big difficulties that brands face once they are interested in moving their supply chain away from their existing supplier, whether that is in their existing country or other. It can be quite opaque which suppliers you can trust, who you should move forward with, and being able to get reliable quotes from vetted suppliers without any of the work that is typically involved is a massive gain, both in savings and in time, not just in the short term, but in the long term, as this prevents sort of bad surprises from trickling in if you work with some of those unvetted suppliers. Comparing landed costs across regions in one view, this is, again, it can be quite complex to know where you should be pivoting your supply chain. When we're surfacing quotes, we make it quite easy for brands to very easily see what different options are available to them, and being able to, at any given moment, just pull the trigger on that production run, which makes most sense in the given time, is one of those things that we're helping with. Leveraging on-site QA and local teams to ensure factory reliability. Again, another piece that a lot of brands struggle with. If you're based in the United States, it can be very difficult for you to go to China at production time and make sure that everything's running smoothly. We have on-site teams that are not just meeting with suppliers and making sure that everything's running on time, but also running on-site QA at production time to make sure that there are no bad surprises with your production run. And we're doing that in all the countries that we operate in. So it can be very difficult for brands to do this if they don't have those networks ready in place. But with what we're building, brands don't have to worry about any of that. And then finally, optimize freight forwarding to reduce total landed costs. Again, it's not just a matter of how you're getting your production made, but also optimizing the freight forwarding piece. We talked about certain, simple strategies, the EXW versus FOB, but more comprehensively, if you have several SKUs, grouping them together into one shipment can be one major way that you can cut your production costs by making sure that your freight forwarding is optimized. All of this stuff is taken care of through Cavela. So as far as brands are concerned, they really are sure they're getting the absolute best pricing possible, not just on how we are sourcing from certain suppliers and how we're navigating the tariffs, but also making sure that they're not losing any money on the on reliability of the final production and on the freight forwarding itself.
Okay, I want to allow time for some brief Q&A. I know we're coming up on the hour, so just quickly, I'm going to mention, and Anthony has the same, we have a tariff impact assessment that we're offering cost-free to customers, both existing and prospective. It's basically a costless one-on-one, so we can discuss your organization's reactions to tariff, exposures to tariff, talk through ideas about how you can mitigate the impact of tariffs. It's a quick conversation. We have very talented, sharp people that can help you address these issues. It doesn't cost you anything. It's going to be low pressure. We're not trying to sell you capital. Just want to offer you the opportunity, or customers the opportunity, to speak with us and get the benefit of our insights into the current situation and how their businesses could react proactively in order to mitigate tariffs impacts.
And similarly on our end, we're offering a sourcing consultation for the brands. We're looking at your current SKUs, where you're currently sourcing. We can talk through an alternative sourcing strategy based off of what we're seeing globally from a tariff standpoint, but also what specific products you are specializing in and how that matches up with our own supplier database. You'll receive free, no obligation quotes for your impacted products, and we're also including 50% off for sample purchase. Again, this is just helping those brands that are feeling the squeeze from the tariffs on their margins. We'll sit down with our sourcing team and we'll talk through exactly what your current sourcing strategy is and what you can do in both the short and the long term in order to make your business more robust to whatever is coming down the pipeline.
Okay, so I'm going to start with some questions I see in the chat. So thanks for your patience as we got through the presentation. Try and move quickly as we come up on the hour. So someone asked a question about CBP, and I was just looking at It's a release of a speech that a senior CBP official gave. And if you look in the second paragraph of that statement, you'll see plenty of discussion about how robust their enforcement actions are. So again, USG is a large entity with a lot of resources, even if they're making governmental efficiency reductions here and there. I think you can assume that CBP is aiming a lot of time, attention, humans, and resources otherwise at this challenge. The next thing I see is a question about, it's a great question about how we think about risk in the current environment. And so it's natural to assume that any funding partner, and this is true of companies like Clearco, this is also true of very large financial institutions, traditional banks that make traditional loans to very large companies, not smaller DTC e-coms or SMBs. You can assume that everyone is reevaluating credit and risk and thinking very carefully about how to deploy capital in this current environment. So we too have done that. I think that the trick for us is you have to support customers as much as you can in these environments, and you cannot retract completely from providing your customers capital and financial support. That is a quick way to run your business into the ground, because at Clearco, we expect resolution of tariff matters. And in the meantime, we want to provide our customers as much financial support as we can to weather this momentary, what we hope is a momentary period of dislocation and volatility. So I think you can expect capital providers and funding partners to be very prudent around the capital they're providing. You can think of them as being very thoughtful about the risk they're adding. In certain cases, and it varies by capital or funding partner, but in certain cases, companies are taking pain in terms of loans they may have already extended, capital they've already advanced, because customers may be experiencing deteriorating financial conditions. So it's natural to assume that everyone's rethinking risk, but here at Clearco, what we're trying to do is we're trying to lean in with our best customers that we think are most sophisticated and also in the best position to address tariffs. Perhaps they have very low exposure to Chinese suppliers. Perhaps they've recently raised equity capital and they want to become very aggressive in terms of attacking competitors that are experiencing tariff-related challenges. And so our job is to sift through that and to be as forward-leaning as is possible. I think the next couple of questions are Cavela questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I alluded to this, earlier in the talk, but Cavela is helping brands find alternative suppliers to make their products, and because of, again, how we've streamlined a lot of our operational workflows, we can get much more competitive quotes than brands can on their own. So that means, in a tariff world, that means helping you move your supply chain to countries where you might be less susceptible to tariffs. In a number of cases, that might not actually make sense for your business. You might still have to produce in China because the products you're making are not well suited to other countries, or your MOQs are simply too low in order to do that. In that case, even remaining in the country that you are, but getting more competitive quotes, allows you to offset the impact of the tariffs by essentially paying less for your production. And as I said, we've been able to cut production costs by, on average, 37%, excuse me, for those brands. And this is in a pre-tariff world. Next question is, how does Cavela earn money? So we operate in much the same way that sourcing agencies operate. So we will source at no cost. We will get you samples as well at the cost of whatever the supplier is charging, and we apply a slight markup on the order itself. As I said, because we're able to cut production costs dramatically, even with our markup, you're still getting on average, as I said, those 37% cost savings. We sit essentially between the brands and the suppliers, which allow us to do a number of things. namely negotiate on your behalf. We have, because we're funneling a lot of business to different suppliers, we can advocate more strongly than a brand could on their own, simply because we are representing multiple brands. So we're ensuring the timelines are met. We're ensuring that you remain high priority, that we can keep the costs low, and we negotiate aggressively on your behalf as well. And in addition to making sure that we have all of the updates of your order in a platform that is easy to use and easy to track, so you don't have to worry about getting emails and WhatsApp messages and what have you. Everything is in a very Shopify/Amazon style visualization, so it's a lot easier to track. Question: Has successful Cavela been with mitigating tariffs on its existing customers? Very much so. So some of our brands are actually have kept their production cost static. I think one of our brands was paying less now with tariffs than they were before tariffs without us. And by and large, what we've seen is for those brands that we have moved their supply chain to a different set of suppliers, their tariffed goods are coming up to the prices they were pre-tariff. So it's, we can't shield all brands from tariffs all the time. And again, we're still figuring out what's happening globally and how these are being applied. But we've been able to consistently cut those production costs pretty dramatically across all of our brands, so that the application of the tariffs has been relatively, the impact has been minimal compared to what their price points were pre-tariff. And as I said, with suppliers in 40 different countries, we're able to move your supply chain pretty reliably to other countries. Question on if you ship DDP, are you still potentially vulnerable to enforcement actions? Potentially. It'll depend on how things are done, and this is why I've been very strong advocate of making sure that you're compliant. So when suppliers are making all sorts of promises to you that they will get your shipment to your warehouse at no extra cost, and making sort of shady promises there, you could still be liable. Being ignorant to how things are done doesn't exempt you from penalties. So as I said, we've seen cases where brands have been penalized because they were ignorant of what suppliers were doing in the back end. And so that's why we index very heavily on having on-site operations who are able to vet your production, vet the suppliers on your behalf, and make sure that everything is compliant, so you don't have any bad surprises that trickle in afterwards.
Maybe take the last question on bonded warehouses, Anthony, and then we can wrap it up.
Please, yeah, of course. Are there other associated costs in addition to transit, storage, administrative? Yeah, so it can depend on the bonded warehouse itself. There's sorts of all different kinds of deals that are emerging. It's case by case, but there are bonded warehouses that are popping up kind of all over. I've seen a number in China, but also in Mexico. Obviously, is a very attractive deal simply because of how close it is to the United States. It depends on the agreement with the bonded warehouse.
Okay. Well, listen, we want to thank everyone for joining us. Greatly appreciate your participation in today's webinar. Anthony and I are reachable. We both would love to spend time with customers via our tariff assessments, and happy to continue to answer additional questions. And from my point of view, everyone at Clearco wakes up every day with the same goal, and that's to serve operators and entrepreneurs who are running rapidly growing DTC e-coms that need capital and that are trying to get a product and service to their customers. So look forward to hearing from you. And Anthony, I'll let you sign off.
So much. Yeah, very appreciative of Clearco for helping host this, and for everyone for checking in. I think that, by and large, everyone's very much in the same boat, trying to figure out what's happening and how to, not just shield the impact on their brand, but also, as Andrew said at the very beginning, find the opportunity in this, because I think there is opportunity. So we're available as always to help you figure out what makes most sense for your specific needs. And just keep in mind that there's a lot of brands that are feeling the same pains as you are right now. So no one's, you're not alone in this, as much as it feels that way.
Amen. Great way to end.
Great.
All right, we'll look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.